Well, here we are. Happy Markcast Monday, later in the day here, getting ready, coming off of the Grey Cup playoffs, getting ready for the Grey Cup here this weekend. Reed here. We got Evan. Jason's resetting his router, having a little bit of just potatoey webcam. We'll get it figured out. We'll make our big announcement about our show here coming up. I had told Evan, I said, if the BC Lions make it to the Grey Cup, well, I was going to drink mimosas because we were going to do this earlier in the day. Then I was going to drink a Shiner. None of that happened. So we're here. I got a Zycam in my mouth right now, fighting off a cold. Evan, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, lots to talk about from this weekend. Very interesting matchup that we'll be, I guess, participating in. Well, not playing in, obviously, but being around next weekend. Very interesting. Not a scenario that I predicted, to say the least.
I know, and I want to get people's opinions on this. Leave your comments, whatever. Certainly not the sexiest matchup here we have. Montreal going into Winnipeg. Obviously, Montreal looked really good against the Argos. We'll talk through all that. To me, that's exciting. I love Cody and friend of the show, and we've had a lot of the Alouettes guys on over the years. And I'll tell you, even just to drop a name here, I really enjoyed DMing with Gary Stern about Danny and kind of all the work the Alouettes were doing here Sunday morning while I was watching Mac Jones throw very Chad Kelly-like interceptions in Germany. So that was fun getting Gary's thoughts. Gary's excited for all of this, so we're doing good. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing good, Reed. Thanks for having me as always, and looking forward to the live show on Saturday.
Yeah, so we're getting a lot of questions about that. So this is all confirmed now, getting it all in. Would have been better under different circumstances, but Saturday in Hamilton, we are going to be live at the BC Lions Den as part of all the team headquarters and all of that stuff. It's at the convention center. You do need a ticket for that, but it's like whatever Canadian. I think it's like $30, but we're going to be there. Matt Baker and Jordan getting all that set up. They said we're going to be in the high traffic area. I'm getting a banner printed out here. So we're going to be live 3 to 5 local time. So feel free to come by, say hi. I guess I'm going to have a sign. Already getting guests lined up. All the emails have been sent, but we have confirms. Dan Ralph's going to be on the show. Ted Wyman's going to be on the show. The guys from the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast. I'll post an official list. Matt Baker, of course. You want Jamie Nye? We got him. Daryl Davis is going to be on, and then of course Naylor and Farhan as well. They normally do a tag team whenever they can come in, but should be fun. It'll be Evan, Jason, and I, and then kind of a rotating cast. Jason, what do you make of that? Because we were going to do the anchor bar. I think this is good. Team headquarters get a lot more of the CFL people. Not like I said, getting a little sign printed out. It'll be fancy.
Yeah, I think it will be better this way. I think that we'll for sure have some traffic going through that area and whatnot. So I think it'll be good.
Evan, are you excited? First taste here of the Canadian Hamilton live here for Grey Cup weekend?
Oh, absolutely. I think we're going to have a great time.
So that'll be good. Yeah. So we post it Saturday. We go live Saturday at 3. That way you can watch it Saturday. You can watch it Sunday morning, kind of all the way up through. And then usually, knock on wood, we kind of get a good boost when people are looking for the Grey Cup and something to watch for that. So live Saturday, easier to do, just obviously with all the different locations, coordinated all of that. Reporters are done, team practices and all that kind of stuff. So that Saturday evening is kind of a good dead period. Do that, and then we'll be hanging out Sunday. And then, I just like seeing the game Sunday. So I don't like to do, all the other, you got the Ted Wymans of the world running around trying to do post-game interviews. Like, I like being able just to hang out, have a beer, and kind of watch that. So yeah, James says, great list of guests. I'm waiting to hear back, but presumably, Darren Bombing is going to be on. I think Tim Baines is going to get back to me. So we'll be good. It should be about 10 guests or so. We'll roll for 2 hours, 10, 15 minutes a guest, and then we'll kind of ask questions and do everything else. But yeah, come by, because, we gotta, Baker and everyone, they're putting a lot of work in here, getting us set up in their area. So let's make sure we get some Markcast people coming out. Jason, I don't know if this is the Grey Cup that we wanted or deserved, but this is the Grey Cup that we want, or that we're getting here. Montreal and Winnipeg. Initial thoughts, because this is the first time ever, 110 years, we've never had Winnipeg and Montreal.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is due to Winnipeg being in the East for a lot of its recent history, at least when Montreal was good in the 2000s. So I think that explains why we haven't seen this matchup in the Grey Cup before. And like you said, I think it's a totally unexpected matchup. I thought that Toronto was going to roll on Saturday. Unfortunately, for my prediction, it didn't happen. But I'm happy for the fans in Montreal that they get to see their team in the Grey Cup for the first time since 2010. It's been a while.
Yeah, Evan, we were talking obviously all throughout the group chat, lively group chat on Saturday. But like here we got Andrew Murray. I'm sure he's gonna watch this year. He's like, I'm out. Like, I don't, Montreal is boring. I don't care about that. I've had a lot of the guys on the show here this year, especially this year, but the last couple, and Cody, like, what do you make of this? Because I think we all expected Winnipeg, but the Toronto things certainly threw us for a loop here.
Well, look, it's certainly interesting, right? I said at the top of the show, it's not something that we predicted to happen. Definitely not. I mean, I could have gone through several other scenarios in regards of Grey Cup matchups at the beginning of the season, and I probably wouldn't have landed on Winnipeg, Montreal, despite there only being 9 teams in the CFL, right? So it's an interesting matchup to say the least. And I know, there's some people like Andrew, obviously, some guys might not be excited about it, but I'm remaining optimistic. Obviously, we're going to dive into the games from this weekend here, but after seeing Montreal, the way their defense played, obviously, and then Winnipeg's offense slowing down a bit against BC. Now, obviously, Winnipeg was still able to win the game, but I mean, these teams are in the Grey Cup for a reason, right? You can't forget about that. Montreal is obviously the wild card here, right? That's going to be the story when we go to Hamilton next week. The team that no one really expected to do anything is here competing for a championship. So yeah, I mean, and then you've got Winnipeg on the other side, which is, the experienced group of veterans. Their guys are aging, but they're still going strong. 4th Grey Cup in a row going back to 2019. So really a 5-year stretch, even though there wasn't a season in 2020 due to COVID. So definitely 2 unique ends of the spectrum there. But, I'm still excited and I'm still optimistic. And, last year, a similar situation happened where it was Winnipeg versus Toronto. And, I remember watching, the Grey Cup, your Grey Cup show, Reed, when you were in Regina. And I think there were some people on there who were saying, well, Winnipeg's going to blow them out. And a lot of people this time around, again, I'm not going to get into too many details here. We're going to save that for next weekend. But you're going to have a lot of people saying the same thing. Oh, Winnipeg will just blow them out. But, we'll see, right? I think, Jason, I think you were the one that said it, man. It's an interesting league. Some funny things can happen. So I'm, again, keeping my eyes out for that.
I'm really bullish right now, at least on the Montreal side of it. Like, I get all sides of it, and I absolutely get, okay, last year, it's these 2 juggernauts, and, Toronto barely ekes it out. And, it's kind of like when we did Cena Rock, and then they did Cena Rock again the following year, and the first year, what was it? Cena, or I guess The Rock won the first year, and then he put over Cena the second year. Like, I kind of get that. And hey, we're seeing these teams again. Obviously Toronto did not, I'm very excited to get into this. Toronto did not play like a team that wants to be in the Grey Cup. It certainly doesn't feel like Jack Kelly wants to, but I'm excited. Like, just having, talked with Cody, having been on the show, Jason Moss, all of that stuff. I've talked a lot with Rod Peterson over the weekend as well, obviously with him being in the whole Saskatchewan market. And like, here's these guys, they were the total scapegoat, sent out, kicked to the curb. You're the problem. We're going to rebuild this whole thing. Obviously, we've, chronicled Saskatchewan's problems all season. And to see, I just could not be more happy for Cody and his wife and baby and like their whole family. And obviously there's, many, many more players on the team, and they all have their individual stories. But like, having lived through a lot of that with these guys this year, I am excited for that. Like, Winnipeg's been here, and like, we're, a Dunk's trying to make Caleros, 4-time in a row, and this has never been happened. Like, there's a lot of other stories, and kind of everyone's getting their flowers on both sides of it. But I just am really proud for all of that. Jason, any other thoughts on kind of the Montreal or Winnipeg of it before we get into the game?
Yeah, for Winnipeg, you have a chance to be one of the true CFL dynasties. And just before I got on here, I released a video on the history of dynasties since 1958 in the CFL and how few of them there have been. So Winnipeg has a chance to etch their place in history. They had a chance last year. Obviously, we're heavily favored against Toronto, like Evan said, and they didn't get the job done. So they kind of have a chance to make amends this year. And for Montreal, I mean, I'm just really happy. Again, like I said, they have not been in the Grey Cup game since 2010. They had such a rough patch after Anthony Calvillo retired. I think they missed the playoffs like 4 or 5 years in a row. So I'm really happy for them from that perspective, and the fact that they've gotten so far.
Yeah, obviously, would have liked BC to be in this. Obviously, would like to be at the Lions Den for our live show under different circumstances. Obviously, it's going to be exciting. We're promoting, Grey Cup next year in Vancouver, and we'll be involved in all of that. But, I've said on here, when BC lost that game at home against Winnipeg, was it October 4th? Like, really that night process kind of the end of the BC Lions season. I mean, it's been happy to kind of follow along, and obviously everything here through the playoffs. I've kind of resigned myself to that. So, even watching the game, the Montreal win was far more exciting for me than kind of anything with BC. And honestly, I'm happy, if we can't have the Lions in there, I'm happy that, Tim and Cliffy and all the work that they put in with the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast. I'm really happy that I feel like, okay, we'll die this year so you can kind of live on and they can enjoy that. And I mean, they've certainly been following this much longer than I have. So, in terms of, we'll start with Evan. In terms of this Argonauts loss, and I was talking with Dorothy about this, I am not the longest sports, historian in my life, and really got into this football stuff with the Marcast. But to me, this was the biggest egg I've ever seen laid in any sport I've ever followed. I've never, the Mariners and the Kraken, I've never seen a bigger, just complete falling apart here, collapse. Evan, is that how you took it? And what did you look at the loss here of the Argonauts?
Definitely. I mean, I will say this, Mike Mitchell, obviously, who covers the Argos, he predicted that the Alouettes would win this game, but I don't think anybody predicted it would happen in that fashion where it was a complete domination. Everybody thought that if Montreal had a chance, it would be, this close fought battle where somebody wins in the fourth quarter and has that big play. That wasn't the case. I'm sure Argos fans will probably be saying this for a while, but Chad Kelly chose to have his worst game on probably the worst day of the year, or the worst time that it could have happened, rather. I was stunned, to say the least. It raises, in my head at least, it raises some questions, about, I think it was 57 days was the number I heard on TSN, from the last time that the Argonauts actually played a meaningful game, because then they won the East. And, kind of just after that, it was, it became more about, the moral victories, right? And obviously they were able to get to 16 wins, which has tied the CFL record. But people were saying, right, the one team that I think had 16 wins before this Toronto team was the 1989 Edmonton, then Eskimos, now Elks. But, they didn't make it to the Grey Cup either, I don't think, or they lost, right, along the way. And, I really couldn't, I mean, as much as you want to, you want to cancel out history or whatever, and you might not want to think about that. I was very certain that Toronto was going to win this game. I didn't know. It was kind of hard to predict whether it would be, by 10 points or by 30 points. But I just, Toronto was obviously the way more complete team on paper. And look, Montreal put up a great performance against Hamilton in the semifinal. I think I talked about that, and I said that Montreal did have a chance in this game, but it was a slim chance. Really, this game, I think more than anything, it falls on the shoulders of Chad Kelly, because in my opinion, both defenses obviously played very well. Now, Noel Thorpe's unit in Montreal clearly was from that Marc-Antoine Dequoy pick six at the beginning of the game, where Toronto, because they looked like they had all the momentum, right? I mean, I don't want to get too, carried away or lost here, but really, you saw how quick Toronto was moving the ball on their first drive. It was like 4 plays and they were already down there by the goal line ready to go. And then Marc-Antoine picks off Chad Kelly, runs it all the way back however many yards, and Montreal never looked back after that. But my thing here is, I feel like both defenses played well. Montreal is obviously, they really stepped up. I mean, 7 turnovers or whatever, some ridiculous number. I mean, it's impossible to win a game when you have 7 turnovers, but they really stepped up. But more than anything, I just think, Chad Kelly, like the blame really has to be pointed towards him, because if you go back and you look at this game, several, not even of, I mean, look, he had 4 interceptions, but even on some plays that weren't turnovers, he just wasn't seeing the field well that day. And I don't know what the case was. It's, I can't explain that, right? I'm not Chad Kelly. I'm not in his head. I don't know what's going on. And I'm sure he knows, obviously, that this is incredibly disappointing and that he's a much better player than that. But yeah, I mean, I just, you have to point the finger at Chad Kelly. His 2 pick sixes. I mean, I hate to be critical, but those were, some of the, maybe worst throws that I've seen in a game, given everything that's on the line, right? I mean, it would be bad in a regular season game to make those mistakes, but when you're doing it, in the playoffs, keep in mind in front of a sellout crowd, or, the biggest Argos crowd I think that there's been maybe ever.
BMO Field, right? Jason, wasn't it? It was the biggest one they've had since moving to BMO, right?
Yeah, it broke the 2017 East Final when Saskatchewan played there as the crossover team.
Right, but the bottom line here is, this game, obviously very surprising result. Montreal, I think it's safe to say the reason they scored 38 points was because, of their defense, the 2 pick sixes. Next week when we're actually in Hamilton, I'll get into more, of a deep dive about the offense and where that, might let's just say that Montreal's offense is going to have to step up a bit more even than they did in that game if they want to have a chance against Winnipeg. But, in this situation, it didn't matter, right? Argos just made, mistakes quickly, and that was it. That was all she wrote. I mean, at halftime, it was only a 10-3 game at halftime. Argos could have easily gotten back into it. It was one score, but you just felt like it wasn't going to happen. You just saw the way that Chad was distributing the ball, and you just had a feeling, or at least I had a feeling that by that point it was kind of a lost cause. So very unfortunate for Toronto. Very surprising. I'm still, again, watching that game, it was just like you're saying, oh my God, every, 10 seconds because there's another turnover and Montreal keeps putting these points on the board. But ultimately, definitely, an upset of the year. And the last thing I'll say about this before I hand it back, this game proves more than anything. And I love stories like this, but, what was really nice to see was, and this includes myself, but all year, we said, well, Montreal is good, but they don't have a win against Toronto or Winnipeg and BC. But you watch this game and then you realize none of that matters if you can just win that one game. Yeah. Right? I think about, look, I'm a Rams fan, okay, in the NFL. And, we lose to the 49ers every year. That's like the one, kind of thing that you can't get off your back. But we played the 49ers in the playoffs in the NFC Championship, won, and then won the Super Bowl, right? So it doesn't, as much as we sit here and, we have to have something to go off of, and one of the storylines that Montreal had throughout the season was that they couldn't beat a team with a winning record. It doesn't matter. None of that, all of that goes out the door because once you get into the playoffs, you want to know every week. And that's, I give credit to Montreal for that because that's what everybody was saying. They just can't beat the good teams. And had they lost to Toronto, that trend would have continued. That would have been, something that people would have still talked about. It would have proved the point. But instead of, just letting them have that, they went out there and proved a lot of people wrong. And I mean, a lot of people.
Yeah. It was just crazy. I'm sitting there watching and, like you said, Toronto, well, first off, so you see, they're showing all the pregame and Chad Kelly's doing his interview and he's got like the bug eye. They're like, oh man, like Chad is locked in. And like you said, the further the game went along, you could see in his eyes. They would and you just would see him scanning the field and try to find someone making really terrible throws. Like you said, the first drive down, I joked yesterday on Twitter when Mac Jones had his horrendous interception against the Colts. I said, I think Chad Kelly got on the plane and went to Germany to go play for the Patriots today. Because here's someone that's been so ice cold all season, and I want to get into kind of the rest versus rest of it. But yeah, to watch Toronto go the whole way down the field, I'm thinking this is going to be a long day for the Alouettes. This is brutal. And then that pick six, and you're like, God, okay, maybe they got a little reprieve here. Maybe it's going to be. And then, it kept happening and happening. And I just, it got to the point where it was almost comical, where it's like, oh, they tried to, go for it on third down, and then they got stopped, and then Chad Kelly threw another pick six. Like, it just seemed like, it was, Chad's no good, horrible, very bad day, or whatever that book is. It was really just a complete collapse. First off, Jason, what did you make just of that, of kind of the evolution of Chad Kelly here over the last, the last, whatever it was, 48 hours?
Well, the craziest thing is this was really the first game that he lost this year. Like, he was 15-1. Technically, they credited that Calgary loss that they had against him, but he didn't even finish that game. So this was literally a perfect season for him up until this point. and then it just all unraveled all at once. And I think that in terms of like the biggest egg layings that I've ever seen, if you want to use that phrase, I would go back to the 2019 Grey Cup with Hamilton, that 15-3 team, how excited I was for that team and how they were favored in a Grey Cup for once, and then they just come out and just get destroyed by a Winnipeg team that we didn't know how good they were at that point in time. They were a third seed in the West Division coming into the playoffs that year. And then I go back to 2013 in the Super Bowl where the Denver Broncos, led by Peyton Manning and that record-setting offense, just getting destroyed by that Seahawks defense. And it really was a defensive story for Montreal in this game. I mean, the offense for Montreal really cashed in when they needed to. And I think that is really the key with their team, is when they do get those takeaways, that's when they score their points. And they've just been a very complimentary team in that regard all year long. And I think that one thing with this group this year, and I think it's really key for this entire organization, is that midway through the season, obviously they had the turmoil in the offseason, but midway through the season, they bring in Darnell Sankey and Sean Lemon, and they signify to the rest of that unit that we're going to go for it. We're going to, try all out to win the Grey Cup this year. And ultimately, those signings have paid off in a huge way. What did Darnell Sankey have? 8 tackles, 2 sacks, and interception or something like that. Maybe that was last week, but he had a gigantic game in this one, and Sean Lemon had a huge impact as well.
Yeah, you saw that now. You saw a lot of like Johnny come latelys on that. Like, and we've tracked the Darnell Sankey. I'm like, why wasn't he there at the beginning of the season? Oh, because he was winning the championship for the XFL Roughnecks and or Renegades, excuse me. And we've talked about that a lot. I thought that was interesting on that. Ken has a comment here, and they're talking about the chat. Chad feels bad. Biggest responsible for 5,000 more tickets to the big jump in the TSN audience. I did see that just come before I got on here. I don't know when it was posted. I assume earlier today, but good ratings for the East. And we were talking, the Saturday playoffs versus all that. I did. I humored myself, maybe not everybody, with the joke that we finally get the biggest audience in BMO history for the Argos, and they completely crap the bed. And then we've lost the Argos for another generation. But but it was a good crowd. I mean, it has to be. I've never been a fan of my team has never been the favorite in anything. I mean, even the Kraken last year, and we were the underdog going into the playoffs, and God knows the Mariners and everything else. But I guess maybe the Seahawks when they were playing the Broncos, I've just never had that of having the dominant team go in and kind of have the rug pulled out from under you. Jason, what did you make just of that with kind of the we've done this grassroots effort, Toronto's had a great year, kind of seeing this collapse now. It was kind of a beautiful disaster, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I kind of joked in the group chat that they're not used to playing in front of this many fans. And I think that when you actually think about it, that's like 10,000 more people watching you in your home games than what you usually get in BMO Field. And, if you've ever been to BMO Field, it gets really loud in there, even when there is only 13,000 people or whatever there. So, I mean, I can't even imagine how loud it got, and how silent it got when the game started going sideways for them. And it was just shocking because it just kept on going downhill for them. I think that it kind of reminded me, as the game was going on, of a couple years ago when Saskatchewan and Winnipeg played in the West Final, and Saskatchewan had a 6-1 turnover edge and Winnipeg still won. I still thought through the majority of this game that Toronto had a chance to get it together, but it just continued to keep on sliding for them. And that third quarter really was the exclamation point when wasn't it 3 interceptions in a row or something like that from Chad Kelly. So it just completely unraveled for them.
Yeah, we had here Mark's putting in the comments, Chad's only got 19 starts, obviously with last year and the Grey Cup and all, coming in and relief and all that. Yeah, Evan, is it just, I think Chad's going to bounce back. This is obviously, and I saw he posted, I think it was an Instagram that got shared on Twitter or whatever today. And, the whole, hey, this wasn't what we wanted, but all this kind of winded up. Chad will be fine, but just overall, I guess just thoughts on that and kind of, just the unraveling, I guess, to kind of round out that before we talk about the rest of the game.
Well, Chad will be fine. He's in the MOP conversation for a reason. We don't forget what he did during the regular season. But more so than just Chad, I think the Argos will be fine in general. That entire team, the one thing that a lot of people brought up is that, this team, I mean, they've really, they haven't faced any kind of, adversity or any, issues really this year. They've just won everything, that they never really had a situation where, there was too much on the line. It was kind of like we just go out and win football games and that's that. And then, here they come into the playoffs, they find themselves in a sticky situation where they're facing a very good defense. And, that's just one of those things you have to learn. As somebody said it, Chad only has 19 starts or whatever. He's very, as much as we've praised him this year, he's not Zach Collaros. I mean, Collaros has been doing this forever, or at least, well, he hasn't started his entire duration, but he's been in the CFL for a long time, and of course now he's going to be going, 4 straight Grey Cups. Chad hasn't had that. Like Chad, the conversation around Chad Kelly started last year only because he played, a half in the Grey Cup. And then
it was like quite part of a quarter. I mean, right? I mean, I was.
It wasn't even half.
Spoiler! I was drinking on the concourse. Jason, it was like the end of the fourth, right? It wasn't even that half.
Yeah, maybe like 3 drives at most. Yeah.
Okay.
But my point is, the whole conversation around Chad Kelly started because of a couple drives, and the fact that he came into this season, as the starter with MBT off to the USFL and exceeded everybody's expectations. I mean, that's not easy to do. And what's good, like that, I think more than anything, the Argos now have found a franchise quarterback. That's what's really important. It's a difficult loss in the playoffs and it's not what you want to see. But that was really his first bad game. Like Jason said, that's like the first game he's ever lost, in the CFL. So as much as we could sit here and like I said earlier, you have to put the blame on his shoulders because he made some, not so great throws. And, they really did have an opportunity to get back into it. But because of his third quarter, that opportunity kind of went away. I will say the other thing that I want to touch on besides Chad Kelly and the Argos positioning and what the future looks like, I lost my train of thought, but let's think.
It's okay. Well, sir,
circle back because it's going to come back to me.
It's okay. I did see a comment where I think it was Derek Dennis posted that, only having 2 losses during the season is not enough adversity to be able to, not only for, Chad, but for the team kind of in general. Like, we saw that obviously with the Patriots and the Giants back, whatever year that was. Like, you need to be able to go through a little bit of adversity to be able to figure that out. And it's too hard kind of in the middle of the game. Jason, I know you did your video talking about kind of how the dynasty, right? How the dynasty, however you phrased it, right? The dynasty, not the dynasty, like the video I'm talking about, right? Talking about the high, in terms of them not facing enough adversity going down the pike. What did you make of kind of that with what was it, 16-2 or whatever?
Yeah, for sure. And Derek Dennis is referring to that 2016 Stamps team that lost to the Ottawa Red Blacks in a great game where the Ottawa Red Blacks actually had a losing record going into that Grey Cup. So, I mean, really shows you what can happen in this league and really in sports in general. I believe I saw that all of the teams in all the major sports that have the regular season best records didn't win the championship. So you look at the Warriors team that went 73-9 or whatever it was. You look at the Patriots team that went 16-0. These are great regular season teams and great teams overall, but it really just takes that one game in the playoffs to trip up. And like Derek Dennis said, the adversity throughout the season, you don't really face it if you have that easy of a stretch throughout the season. So I think that we have seen that trend throughout CFL history, particularly in recent years. I mean, you look back to those Alouette teams with Calvillo, they took a long time to really be, a successful team in the Grey Cup specifically, even though they've had so many great regular seasons. Those Calgary teams, they had many years where they had disappointing finishes in the playoffs. And ultimately, Winnipeg really can't be caught off guard by this when they play Montreal because, I mean, Winnipeg was a 14-win team this year and didn't go through a ton of adversity either.
I was texting Rod, I said Rod Peterson a little bit. I said, I bet those Argo fans would like to have McLeod Bethel-Thompson back right about now. Like, oh, we're all good with Chad Kelly and all that. Evan, did you remember what your point was?
No, I didn't. I don't know. I don't know what happened. It really slipped away. It's going to bother me for a while, but I'm going to do my best to move on.
So here, let's get to, so obviously, and I want to make sure we obviously get to, BC and Winnipeg and all this kind of stuff. okay, Chad Kelly collapse, Argonauts, all of that stuff. Montreal here, things that they did well. We talked about Darnell Sankey, right? Cody, had the interception, kind of the Cody game, 18 to 25, almost 200 yards. Like, is this enough? Because there was not a lot of offense for the first half of this game for Montreal. Like, is there enough offense here for them to go up against Winnipeg?
If their defense plays like this, they have a shot to beat anybody. They're on an all-time heater in terms of their defense right now. And this is what this game really showed, that the importance of defense in the CFL, when a defense can really take control of a game and force that many turnovers, because really the key to the Alouettes season this year has been scoring non-offensive touchdowns. And they got 3 of them in this game. Obviously the 2 pick sixes, the Dequoy one, like you guys mentioned, but also that James Letcher kick return when Toronto looked like they were, mounting a comeback in the fourth quarter. That was huge. I think you got to put James Letcher in the Mark Cast Hall of Fame after that one, especially if he wins the Grey Cup on Sunday. So I think at the end of the day, that's just kind of been Montreal's formula all season long. Play ball control type offense, make the timely plays when they get the takeaways, and they did exactly that in this game.
That's so funny. Because spoiler alert, like I watched both these games. I had the BC game on. I'm getting ready for my bat mitzvah. I'm unloading there, but I watched about 18 football games yesterday or whatever. So yeah, I completely forgot. And I will tell you, so because we had James Letcher on, whatever it was, going into the last week against Hamilton, and it, like total nothing burger game, right? Because it's the game before the playoffs. And I remember sitting there and I'm interviewing him, and he's like, I'm just trying to get my spot. And I'm thinking, like, Montreal is going to get killed, right, by Toronto. Like, this isn't even right. Like, oh yeah, like, so proud of him, because that was the thing. Like, any momentum here, Toronto. Okay, this is the 16-2 team that we know. Like, they're battling back, like we've seen Winnipeg do so many times. And it was like, just like that, James Letcher's back down the field and totally negates the touchdown. Evan, to you about Montreal's strengths here going in and what they can carry over to the Grey Cup.
Well, actually, I did remember what I was going to say earlier, and it does tie into this conversation because Jason brought up James Letcher. Now, I was going to say that, because besides like the Argos and what their future looks like, there was a point in that game, and even though I knew still that they weren't going to win, there was a point in that game, in the fourth quarter where I think Toronto scored 14 in the fourth quarter. They had some quick offense where Chad finally found a rhythm. It ended up being too little, too late. But that's the one thing that I was going to talk about was James Letcher put the nail in the coffin, on the Argos season, because at one point I think it was a 1-possession game, and then he scored on that ensuing kickoff from the touchdown, and that was when we were all like, okay, well, that's going to be it. I mean, I kind of knew by that point, even if Toronto, does some cool things here at the end, I think Montreal still hang on. But James Letcher, man, what a cool, I mean, again, it's one of these things where, you might not hear about a guy until very late in the season, sometimes in playoffs. I think about Chris Matthews, what he did in that run with the Seahawks, all those years back when they, I think that was the year they lost to the Patriots, but he had a couple big playoff games. And I believe he's a CFL alumni as well, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, some guy, James Letcher, he had, people maybe won't talk about this as much, but James Letcher had some pretty big shoes to fill, because Chandler Worthy, their normal return guy, I would say, I mean, look, we always talk about, I think, well, this season at least, we've talked a lot about, Javon Leake and Mario Alford in terms of, great specialists in the CFL. But, Chandler Worthy deserves his flowers too, man. And, he's had some very big play. I think he's had a couple touchdowns called back, because I feel like he's done a lot more than maybe stats would indicate. But my point being, James Letcher had some big shoes to fill, and he pretty much, put the icing on the cake to that game, just as people, because I think there was a couple people that were getting excited, like, oh, maybe Toronto's going to do something, and Montreal's offense has been slow all day. But, to get back to what we were talking about in terms of Montreal's strengths, I mean, in this game, their strength was, regardless of how Toronto was feeling, whether they were stalling or whether they were mounting a comeback, they kept putting points on the board one way or another. Offense, defense, special teams, they were able to put points on the board when it mattered most. And I hope, that's something they can continue against Winnipeg. Now, obviously, Winnipeg with their veteran experience might not be making as many mistakes. Again, that was the big difference to me between Toronto and Winnipeg this season when you're talking about top teams in the CFL. Toronto's kind of like, the hot new up-and-comer. Obviously they beat Winnipeg in the Grey Cup last year, but, you got a new quarterback. It feels a bit different, right? You really don't know how things are going to go. But Winnipeg, and this, it goes the same against Montreal. They're kind of the new hot and up-and-comers now after what they've done in the playoffs with their defense. But Winnipeg is just that old, it's like that old guy who just sits on the, his porch and tells you a bunch of stories. Like, they're a veteran team. They know everything. They're always going to have something to do and something to say. And, that's going to be a tough task for Montreal. But, if we're talking about strength still, I think, one other thing, it goes without saying, but their defense, particularly up front, next week I want to get more into. We've been talking so much about Darnell Sankey and Sean Lemon. I'm going to start talking about a couple other guys on that defense next week once I sit down and really get a better gist of things. But I'll throw in some, I'll elaborate next week on, Darnell Sankey, possibly. He has the opportunity to win 2 Pro Football Championships in a year, which I think Ken here pointed out in the chat earlier. But, that defense, when you talk about, and I was giving credit to Noel Thorpe too, their defensive coordinator, but one storyline, I think more than anything going into this game, the one major strength is that, while their offense, their offense didn't have to do a lot that game, but their offense didn't have to do much against Hamilton either. They had their moments, but none of these Montreal offensive performances have been anything to write home about. But when you have a defense playing that strongly and can force 7 turnovers against one of the best teams in the league, there's no telling what could happen. And I understand Winnipeg's a different breed. I understand, again, they've got all the experience, they've got all the tools, they've got all the weapons. It just never ends with them. But, Sean Lemon said before that game in Toronto, he says, we're going to shock the world. And sometimes those quotes backfire on you, but they really lived up to it. And again, I'm not gonna talk too much about Lemon and Sankey here right now because we've already, we've talked about those guys ad nauseum, and I'll be bringing them up again next week when we're on the longer show, and I've got time to really do a breakdown of every player individually. But man, if they win this game against Winnipeg and that defense plays the same way they did against Toronto, that will be one of the most impressive things that I've ever seen across any pro sport. I'm young, right? I wasn't around for some of the great, dynasties or great runs even that we've seen, because I guess Winnipeg is more the dynasty here, but that would be extremely impressive. And you can tell that they found something special here. They found that the secret recipe, the secret sauce or whatever. So that's definitely a strength that goes without saying.
I like the mustached Cody Fajardo here. We had talked last year when Nathaniel Hackett grew the goatee, and it was Raul Hackett. And I thought, this is like Raul Fajardo here coming in. I like this. So we had Cody Fajardo as the man in black here a couple years ago, and he was healing on the Rough Riders. So I like to see that. And then I just wanted to shout out before we move on to the other game, before we get out of here. I like just giving Andrew Murray the shout out here. Saskatchewan Rough Riders fans watching their former QB and OC lead Montreal to the Grey Cup here. So sad Squidward. Jason, any other thoughts? Obviously, we'll here live Saturday. We'll do all the other stuff. Anything else on this game? Anything else from the East before we move on?
Yeah, I just wanted to shout out Jason Moss, head coach for the Alouettes, and GM Danny Machocha. I think they've done an excellent job this season. Danny Machocha having the foresight to, because he was the head coach of this team last year and the general manager. A lot of those guys want to keep both jobs, but he ultimately decided, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to hire a head coach. And he brought in a guy that he's very familiar with in Jason Moss. Jason Moss actually was a quarterback of a team that he of Edmonton Eskimos that won the Grey Cup in the early 2000s. So Machocha is pretty familiar with him. So I think at the end of the day, those two guys have been a big part of their success this year.
Last thought here, and I have this tweet up. I had my I like the beanie and the hat look. And I've noticed that in a couple of games here, the beanie and the hat look that Jason Moss has. I tried pulling that out. Very awkward look here. But we talked here all season, right, about the games and all that. I don't know, and I don't know when we would ever deep dive this or not, but I don't know if it was the rest versus rust more than like we said before. I don't know if 2 losses is enough to figure out like what is our identity when our back is up against the wall. That to me is a little bit more of what that is. Do you guys have any breaking thoughts on that before we get to the Lions game?
No, not really. I mean, I would compare it to almost like, I was a big Peyton Manning fan back in the day with the Indianapolis Colts. And like, you saw so many times they get out to those 13-1, 14-0 starts, and then they rest their guys the last few weeks of the season. Toronto, I feel like, played a lot more down the stretch, and they tried to keep their guys, kind of active. But at the end of the day, when you're not playing meaningful games for such a long time, it can come back to bite you.
All right, let's get here. We got 20 minutes. Let's get to, because I want to make sure, and then we got Monday Night Football coming up here. I wasn't even disappointed, like I said, in the Lions, because I feel like we all saw this coming, I guess, which makes it even more like heartbreaking of like, well, they're going to go into Winnipeg. They're not going to be able to run the ball. They're, hopefully, Vernon doesn't play horribly, but, we had 3 interceptions. Like, it was kind of like, I felt like we had predicted this. Not that we're like, Nostradamus on this. I think a lot of people could have seen this coming, but frustrating, I guess. Evan, what were your initial thoughts on this? Like I said, I kind of resigned already October 4th. Like, this is probably the fate for the Lions this year. And obviously I held out hope, but what was your initial thoughts?
Yeah, well, this was the matchup that we predicted would happen all the way back in, June or whenever the season started. This seemed like a very likely situation. And unfortunately, the real thing for me about this game that's really disappointing is, without that Vernon Adams Hail Mary to Justin McInnis before half, BC wouldn't have been in this. And that's really, after everything that they've accomplished this season, and everything that they were able to do, it just felt like they fell flat really quickly. And, I point that out not because, I don't want to add insult to injury. The team lost. No. It's very disappointing. A lot of guys on that team, that have been there through thick and thin. And, it's again, when you lose back-to-back years to the same team in the same situation at the same place, that's going to leave a mark for a long time. Because your entire season really comes down to that. But I bring up that they came out flat in particular because first of all, it's the opposite of what we've seen from this team this year. They have been the most explosive team in the CFL. Big plays across the board. Throwing the ball to just a spread of receivers. But Winnipeg wasn't exactly dynamic in this game either. It wasn't like Winnipeg just completely ran them over. This was a very for these teams, at least, low scoring, relatively defensive affair. And I just thought BC was going to capitalize on that, but they didn't. And a lot of the problems that we've seen from this team, throughout the season that we've talked about came up. Once again, you've got Taquan Mizell, 5 carries for 37 yards. Great. It's efficient. You're averaging 7.4 yards per carry. You're only touching the ball 5 times. So it doesn't really matter. And the problem is, because they were, they got down so early in that game, they had to keep throwing the ball. And then Keon Hatcher goes out, and first of all, thoughts before I say anything else.
Oh my God, yeah, thoughts.
Prayers, he might have the Achilles tear according to Farhan, and that obviously extends in the next season. So really a painful. Not only do you lose the game, but you lose somebody that's been so consistent for you all year, and that was really disappointing. That took away, I think, from Vernon's options. He still, was able to distribute the ball somewhat effectively. Like Lucky Whitehead stepped up a bit. Alexander Hollins, only 2 catches, but over 20 yards a catch. McInnis, the leading receiver in this game, which I think was a surprise maybe to myself. Obviously, Keon went down, but there was a couple other guys where I thought, obviously like Whitehead or Hollins might be the next one up. Well, really, McInnis only had that maybe because of the Hail Mary, before half. But really just, I don't want to just keep saying the word disappointment from BC, but, there was a time, like, look, I think the most frustrating part for me was it was 18-13 at one point. BC really, they came back somehow in some way. It was 18-10 at half. Then they get the field goal. I think Winnipeg, had a miss. I might have missed that part, but
yeah, they're doing. But it never felt like you said. To me, it never felt like it was even if it was 18-13. It could have been 40-12. It never felt like it was close enough.
Right. Look, the only time in that game where I felt like there might be some hope was when it was 18-13. The Lions were driving, but then Vernon throws a pick. And then once that happened, I mean, I knew, the writing was kind of on the wall at that point, that Winnipeg, like even with, by that point, they just got 2 field goals after that, and that's all it took. They really didn't need to do that much. So very, quiet, ending to the Lions season. And also, TJ Lee, very unfortunate injury as well. They lost, Hatcher Lee. I mean, some key departures there, in that game. And it just sucks because, like I said earlier, you lose a game like that, it wears heavily. But, those injuries that were suffered in that game, those are significant. That could wear into next year, and it might affect your future plans. And, all around just an incredibly sad outing. But on the Winnipeg side of it, Winnipeg, again, I will credit BC to a degree. Their defense, I mean, they really slowed the Winnipeg offense down. This offense, again, I know I just said BC was the most explosive offense, but Winnipeg's right there with them. And obviously, Toronto before they went out, but Winnipeg, they can put up 40 points, no problem if you're not careful. But BC didn't let that happen. Zach Collaros, 14 of 21 for 158 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. I mean, again, not characteristic from him. And look, I'm not going to, I know BC's different defense is different. And obviously, it'll be a different game next week, different mindset. You're in the Grey Cup. But I mean, if BC's defense can limit Winnipeg's offense like that, and you see how Montreal's defense has been playing lately, not going to give away too much, but that'll be one of the points I'm expanding on in our discussion next week. So for Winnipeg, look, I think for them, they got their run game going, 109 yards and a touchdown from Brady Oliveira. That to me was one of the differences. Again, BC has no run game. Winnipeg has one.
Got a lot.
You've got, I mean, Brady Oliveira is, their MOP nominee for a reason, rightfully so. And the thing is too, very interesting with Winnipeg, but it's not surprising. They had a couple guys on their injury report, Nick Dembski being the most notable one going into this game. And Dalton Schoen was out. He was ruled out prior to this game. But because they just have so many options, and I know BC had some options too, and they obviously, Keon was out, but it just never matters with that team. I mean, someone's always going to step up. This game, it was Kenny Lawler, and it's funny with Kenny Lawler because he got to Winnipeg in 2018, was there through 2021, so he saw the first 2 Grey Cups, left for Edmonton last year for a year. Winnipeg still went to the Grey Cup and lost. How funny would it be if he came back to Winnipeg this year, they win the Grey Cup, and he just played in, he didn't play in every Grey Cup, but he played in every one that Winnipeg won, which is kind of a, that's random. But I was thinking about that when they did the post-game interview with him. I thought, he timed that up well. And he came in late too because, he had the issue with his work visa, I believe. So, they obviously got a boost from him mid-season. But, yeah, all around, I don't want to say this was an expected result, but I think to some people it was. It's just, I thought this might be a more high-scoring affair, right? I didn't see, there was a lot of defensive football this weekend. The CFL, I'll tell you that much. But, yeah, ultimately, Winnipeg's experience and their, just ability to gut things out. Again, this wasn't a very fast game for him, but it didn't matter because when Vernon, if he throws 3 interceptions, which he did, he had one of his, I guess you'd say, off days. He's still throwing for 200 plus yards. It's still an off day for him, but it is what it is. And congrats to Winnipeg. What we are witnessing a dynasty. And I put out on Twitter, I said I would have loved to have seen BC in the Grey Cup, but at the same time, even if we're used to Winnipeg being in this position now, really excited to get to witness that team in person and be a part of what could be a legendary run if they go out and win this game on Sunday.
Well, it's frustrating to me, and I want to get Jason's thoughts. Like, there was a lot made, and I had my tweet here because Dunk was going crazy about earlier in the week, and BC, they're practicing in the dome, and the U Sports teams outside, and who's going to be more prepared. And I don't, obviously the conditions weren't part of it, but I do think it goes into this narrative that BC is not a strong team, right? Just a physically strong. And Gord, friend of the show, he put out, and I'm certainly not going to Gord's a football guy, so he can use words, but he said he does not believe that BC is coached to a high enough level to be able to go in and compete with Mike O'Shea and them kind of pound for pound and physicality wise that way. And, I trust Gordon's opinion on that. Like I said, I don't feel like, I would, read the wedding videographer, but to me, when you have someone like Brady Oliveira, and shame on anybody in the world that's like, oh, should he be the MOP candidate and all that? I mean, literally with the entire first drive, with the entire way down the field, but you have every single BC defender trying to stop this man rushing down the field, and they can't do it. And it's because Winnipeg is stronger, and they can physical, and you got Brady Oliveira that can take on 8 or 9 of these guys. And that, to me, that's where it is. And until BC can get to that level, and we've seen this year, and they come out, like you said, they come out slow, or they come out, they lose at home. I'm living with that right now with the Kraken, and we have Dave Haskell stopping practice and screaming obscenities at them because they're not, practicing and playing to the level that they watch with, I can tell watching from the stands. It's the same way with BC when everything's going good and they can zip and fly around. And it's not, the dome is not the cause of it, but it kind of symbolizes all of that. They're just, a soft team. I hate to say that they're my team, but they're not. It's kind of like the Rams. I don't view the Rams as being an all that physicality team like I do. Maybe the Titans running it down your throat, or the Browns or whatever. Jason, what did you make of this? A lot of time without you talking here.
Yeah, no worries. I think this game was, like you said, won and lost in the trenches. And I think the biggest thing that stood out to me was Winnipeg's defensive line won this game for them. They were just relentless. Vernon Adams had no time to throw the ball. Felt like instantly he always had a defender right in his face. Even the times that he did get protection, I thought that Vernon held the ball too long and took some unnecessary hits. And Vernon, obviously, throughout this game, he was really a warrior. And I think that, he wasn't that 100% clearly, but I think a lot of it has to do with that Winnipeg defensive line. Willie Jefferson, I thought, was the best player on the field on Saturday night, and I think that he is as good as any player in this league when he's playing his best, and he still proved that on Saturday afternoon. So I think at the end of the day, BC has to get a lot tougher. I think a guy like James Butler would have made a big impact in this game. They had that element last year that they really didn't have this year. So I think that maybe they go out and they add a running back, or they add some more beef to that offensive line, really change their mentality and not be ranked dead last in terms of rushing next year. I think that's a big component. Maybe get a little bit heavier on defense. But at the end of the day, you don't have to be this dominant running team, but you have to be able to run the ball a bit when you want to. And BC just wasn't capable of that this year.
Yeah, and I don't, maybe not soft. I don't want. It's not meant to be like offending, but like more of a finesse team. I don't know. It's like when we use Lucky to do kick returns, and I'm like, you got someone that's like, I'm just worried these guys are going to break. And obviously there were field conditions, and Keon got hurt, and TJ, and I know we saw Big Hill go down for Winnipeg, and I think we're still. I don't know if with all the travel and stuff, if any of that stuff is coming out yet. I'll have to track, with Darren's reports, Darren Bombay. But like, I don't know. It just feels to me when you have Brady Oliveira that can literally pick up the entire BC team and carry them down the field. But yeah, my final kind of thoughts on this. We'll round this out here pretty soon. You're at the top of the hour. When we had the second turnover before half, it really just felt like, to me, Winnipeg is a team that you have to play a perfect football game against, and you can't have those turnovers. And obviously Vernon had the picks, the interceptions at the end of the game as well, trying to go. But Winnipeg's just too good that way. You just can't. You got to really play mistake-free football when it comes to that. Evan, any other thoughts on BC's kind of season here? As we've kind of prognosticated, but not kind of seeing it come out.
Well, I don't think you can call it a success because they didn't really prove too many people wrong. They just kind of ended up back in the same spot that they were last year. But I will say you do have to give them credit for, they had one of the most electric quarterbacks that we've seen. Nathan Rourke, last year was, like we talked about Chad Kelly being, the kind of fun guy that everybody was looking at. This year, Nathan Rourke was better than that. And had he not gotten injured in the middle of that season, I think he would have really done some great things. And I know he came back for that playoff game and all, but what I really credit BC more for than anything is just, they took a chance on Vernon Adams. They brought him in, from Montreal at the end of that 2022 season because they knew that Rourke probably wasn't going to be there next year. They took a chance on him. They didn't wait. They didn't, mess around, their entire, front office staff. They just brought him in and they gave him a shot. And he really, they were just fun. They were a fun team. It's a shame that things had to end the way they did, but they were very exciting, and I think that they should be proud of that. I will say that you didn't get to the Grey Cup, you didn't achieve the ultimate goal, but I got to see that team in person this year. I got to see them last year, and it was a great it was just a great time, and obviously still very happy for Vernon and all those guys who I think maybe prove some people wrong. I expected BC to be good this year, but they were good in a way that they played just fast, fun football, and that's something that I'll always be a fan of. I will say, just going back to Winnipeg for a quick minute, I know Jason brought up Willie Jefferson, and I haven't talked about Willie Jefferson this season, but that's a guy I'm really looking forward to watching in the Grey Cup, just because I think he's one of the better all-around athletes that you'll find in pro football. Yeah. I understand that, he was in the NFL and had to come to the Canadian Football League for one reason or another. But, man, even at 32 years old, you watching that guy, he still has so much juice. And I got to give him some credit because he's one of my favorite players to watch. So, hats off to Willie. And, obviously, like Jason said, that defensive line, just had constant pressure on Vernon. Even if they did have a good running game, who knows with the way that those guys were playing up front, if they would have, been able to get something going. So obviously that's more hypothetical, but yeah, man, Willie Jefferson, I gotta, I've been waiting all season to kind of bring his name up. And, I feel like now's a good time to do that because, you don't see a lot of guys. He's got, he's 6'7", that's like basketball. You're talking, he's like a power forward in basketball. You just don't see a lot of guys like that, that are that effective. Maybe, you get these freak athletes in a lot of sports, but Willie's been doing this for a long time now. CFL most outstanding defensive player in I think it was 2019, first year they went to the Grey Cup. So he's been doing that for a long time, doing the dirty work in the trenches, and hats off to him.
Yeah, no, I hate Willie Jefferson and him. He's the strumming. I as someone that's had to play against him here, I hate Willie Jefferson. I don't even know if I could talk to him on the podcast. I would be so angry at that. My last thoughts. We'll get to Jason. We'll get out of here. I had tweeted, like I said, I'm I got my phone mounted. I'm at my bat mitzvah. Watching this stuff. I just said, quoting, I think it's T.S. Eliot, this is not the way the world this is the way the world ends, not with a bang but a whimper. That's kind of what I felt like the end of this game. Just kind of a little bit of a wet fart, a little bit hoping for a little bit more there, and just not really working out that way. Jason, any final thoughts from you?
No, not really. I just wanted to kind of point to a couple of key moments of this game because I do think, unlike you guys, that BC did have a shot to come back in this game. It felt like they actually caught some breaks, obviously, with the McInnes touchdown before the half. That went in their favor. Sergio Castillo missed a couple of field goals for Winnipeg. But the two moments I'm talking about are the blocked punt touchdown by Winnipeg. Yes. That doesn't happen in every game. That was a huge swing in this game, and who knows where this game would have been if that didn't happen. And then when BC was down 18-13, they got the ball back. They were in Winnipeg territory, and then Demerio Houston got a pick off of Vernon Adams that really, I thought, sealed the game at that point, even though it was just a 5-point game. Houston's been doing that all year long. I think he had 9 interceptions on the season. So, great job by him. And Winnipeg's just showing that championship pedigree once again.
Well, here we go. We said at the top, but we will be live Saturday, 3 to 5 at the BC Lions Den here at the team headquarters at the convention center. Should be easy to find, main convention center there. They said we'll be kind of front and center. I will be in Hamilton Thursday night late. There Friday, we'll probably stop by the media State of the Unions tomorrow. But I guess Randy will talk to the public Friday, so we'll probably meander around that. And then if people are around, Jason, I know we'll meet up. And I know there is a tweet up at the Gown and Gavel that Dorothy and I have been invited to make an appearance at. We did the one last year too. So we'll be doing that Friday night. Jason will get together. Evan's getting in. We'll figure out all that stuff. And then Saturday live show before the Grey Cup. So if anyone's around, then we'll do all that stuff. But send DMs and we'll figure out where everyone, if you're in the area, send me a DM. We'll meet up. So Jason, Evan, appreciate it. Evan, anything else from you?
I don't think so, man. Just looking forward to be doing this in person next week. It's crazy that, CFL season's, long. And it's crazy that we've already made it to this point. We've been doing this since beginning of June. That's a long time.
Weekly recap every day or every week since the XFL season kicked off. Here, Jason, anything else from you?
No, just to echo Evan's sentiment. I'm just really excited to see what this live show looks like on Saturday.
Yeah, it should be good. Like I said, a lot of Marquez guests and, Naylor and Farhan and everyone else. So it should be good. I appreciate everyone. Go enjoy. This should be good tonight. Let's go watch Russell Wilson just get his teeth kicked in by the Buffalo Bills. So, Jason, well wishes for your team tonight. I know you echo that sentiment as well. So we'll see everyone Saturday. XFL stuff. We were talking the 13th. I told Evan maybe next week. So we'll see what ends up with that. But we'll see you guys. Stay tuned if any of that stuff happens. So thanks.